Lost in transition. Looking back over the last 4.5 years, there were 3 main obstacles that I experienced, which until recently kept me from completely embracing both my new identity as a man and my life in the broader society. These obstacles were remnants from my former identity as a dyke and my life in the lesbian community. I'd like to tell you about these obstacles, how they made me feel, and what I did to overcome them. This first obstacle might come as a shock to you and may even sound harsh or like I'm going too far, but please hear me out. Many of the women in your life taught you to be androphobic and misandric. Ever since I can remember, I've been inundated with negative information, messages, and stories about men, maleness, and masculinity. These messages inadvertently led me to believe that men were somehow evil, prone to violence, dim-witted, lacking in emotion, and proudly running the world with no regard for women, children, animals, and the planet. Unfortunately, those messages couldn't have been more wrong. Don't misunderstand me. I believe the women who told me these stories and passed along these messages had honorable intentions, both consciously and unconsciously, but still, they were wrong. I did not realize at the time that they were wrong because I was submerged in the lesbian feminist separatist community where I worked tirelessly to fit in, though I never really did. Because of those messages and stories, it took me 8 years to make the decision to see a doctor for my testosterone prescription. I feared that I would end up a totally different person, someone even I couldn't recognize, that I would somehow lose who I was at my core. I would lose my values, goals, aspirations, hopes, and dreams. I was convinced that injecting tea into my body would turn me into an angry, violent, emotionless person, and I did not want that to happen. I really thought it might. I had heard those messages about men being sexist pigs who wanted their women barefoot and pregnant, and I believed them. Now I know better. You will meet some amazing men along this journey, men who embrace your new identity in life, men who value your experience and inquire about your process, men who feel deeply and weep for lost love and lovers, men who abhor violence, men who respect and honor women, men who throw their arms around you and say, "Welcome, brother," and men who think that you're hot and wish you were gay, but that's another story for another time. The second obstacle will be less of a shocker. I was pig-headed. That's an exclamation point there. Time and time again, I told myself and anyone else who would listen just how unnecessary certain aspects of transition are. For instance, I recoiled in disgust the first time I heard someone recounting their story of going through phalloplasty surgery. I labeled their procedure barbaric and misogynistic. Real nice. In the first 2 years on T, I changed identity labels more often than clothes. First I was genderqueer, then I was FTM, then I was a trans man. Eventually I became comfortable identifying as male, then a man. And it's not just the labels that changed. It was also the attitudes. When I was genderqueer, I was against the gender binary and thought of transsexuals as tools for the medical machine. And I presented a workshop at Gender Odyssey on being a virago, which is a very old word meaning a masculine, male-identified female. When I was FTM, I still struggled with using the terms male and man, and I argued with people about not wanting to be put into a gender/sex box. But I went forward with top surgery anyway because it just felt right. Eventually, I started to look and sound like a man, and I realized that I was being treated like a man in public, at work, by my family, and by my friends, and I began to see myself as a man and identified as a man. It's not as scary as you might think it will be. Life improves greatly. You will be able to access public restrooms without being hassled or suspected of being in the wrong place. You will be able to walk down the street, not be called a derogatory name. You will feel as if 100 pounds has been lifted from your shoulders and you'll walk a little taller. Your friends will tell you, "You seem more you now." And your religiously conservative Aunt Betty will tell your dad, "It looks right," in reference to your new appearance. You will hear repeatedly that partners never stay or rarely stay with their FTM boyfriends. But I was lucky enough to meet an amazing woman in seminary of all places. And then I put, yes, I finally went to seminary. Fell deeply in love and even got married. And we just celebrated our 7th anniversary. It's actually 8th at this point now. And we are still deeply in love, and random strangers on the street approach us to say that they see the love we share with each other, and I feel so happy about that. I know that nothing in my life comes close to the immense satisfaction I feel at cultivating a healthful and conscientious relationship. The third obstacle is one that many of your FTM brothers will express sadness or even anger about: the lack of a boyhood experience and or positive male role models growing up. Although my childhood was fairly androgynous, wearing Garanimals, Hang Ten, and OP clothes, getting skateboards and bikes for gifts, and playing goalie in soccer, and spending a lot of time at the beach, I was still expected to be a good girl and live up to a feminine ideal that I never could. So while I spent many years rebelling against the gender expectations of my family and society as a lesbian, I never felt comfortable with or in my assigned gender. In an effort to glean some deep and sacred connection to your newfound male life, you'll decide to read books written by men about men, maleness, masculinity. The first two were written by a gay man and had forewords by lesbian separatists. How could I have known that there were men out there who male bashed too? Then I found books written by men involved in the men's liberation movement. Since I loathe camping and the idea of getting back to nature and beating both a drum in my chest, these books did not excite me. Then I stumbled onto books that provided me with insight into the plight of many men, trans and non-trans alike. Men in general lack positive role models, regret their lost boyhoods, and struggle with how to be a good man. This reading adventure will prove to be one of the best sources of inspiration you will come across in the early stages of transition. Two books that I particularly liked are Fire in the Belly, On Being a Good Man by Sam Keane, and Real Boys, Rescuing Our Sons from the Myths of Boyhood by William Pollock. I also subscribe to a few men's magazines like GQ, Men's Journal, Details. I was pleasantly surprised to find the magazine articles written by men for men very interesting and useful, which was not the case when I read articles in general audience magazines written by men. If you would like to avoid struggling with or embrace losing yourself in your transition and creating barriers between you and others, my suggestion to you is to be open-minded about men, maleness, and masculinity. Respect the different routes people take in transition and the various surgical procedures that people pursue, and be more open to evolving with your transition instead of thinking you're steering the path. Make friends with men along the way. They will prove invaluable to your development into a man. Otherwise, you will regret not opening your heart to men sooner, and you will wish that you had long-term male friends who walked this journey with you. Recognize that only men can truly know what it is to be male, and that the female notion of maleness is absurd, just as the male notion of femaleness is absurd, which you learned from your lesbian sisters. Don't become sexist towards men, thinking that men as a whole group are something to reject. Reject separatism instead, and run as far away as possible from the androphobia and misandry you may encounter in lesbian community. But never forget the lessons that you were taught regarding making choices about and for your own body, and that your biology is not your destiny. Hormones and surgery will change your body inside and out, and in turn, your assigned female sex will become affirmed male. I put a final note. It says, if you would like to avoid losing half your hair in the second year on T, get a prescription for finasteride right away.